Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Arcadia B Signal. I'm Tanya, and I'm thrilled to be hosting today this special conversation with Adrián Treviño, the content creator focused on Bitcoin and co-founder of the Bitcoin Network in Monterey. Adrián, thank you so much for joining us, and please introduce yourself to everyone.
No, thank you, Tanya, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and collaborating here with Arcadia. I'm a content creator focused on Bitcoin. I've been doing content for 3 years now or more. It's my job. It's my basically all my time is dedicated to Bitcoin and doing content, to educating people, to do interesting content about Bitcoin. I have been working with Blink Wallet in their social media, doing content for around 2 years now. I've been collaborating with them for a while. Blink Wallet. If you don't know what is Blink Wallet, it's what first started as Bitcoin Beach Wallet in El Zonte in El Salvador. It was first a project developed by Galoy, which is a US company in El Zonte. It started as a very local project, and then it expanded to Blink Wallet. No, so that was around 2 years ago, and when they changed their name to Blink, I joined them, as well as other content creators in other languages. And so in May I started what is now called Bitcoin Network Monterrey. I saw a kind of a problem in my city, in Monterrey, Mexico, and that was that the crypto community was extremely dominant. Like, there was only crypto-related events. For example, there's a community called MX Web3, MX Web3, also Ethereum Monterrey. We're good friends, like we get along. They're good people, of course. But I decided, okay, there's nothing Bitcoin centered here in my city, so it's time for somebody to do it. So I visited Mexico City, El Salvador. I got to know a lot of people a lot of people from a lot of communities in the last 2-3 years, and I decided, like, it was evident that Monterrey needed more Bitcoin related events. So somebody had to do it, and I started it with Jose Flores, actually, with Jose, which is co-founder and CEO of Arcadia. He helped me, for example, with a sponsorship, and I did all the work, to organize the first events. Now we're here, and what do you want to talk about? Mexico, the community?
100%. And so I really love the fact that you have almost like a multicultural background when it comes down to Mexico, maybe even countries a little bit like El Salvador. And as a content creator, I think one of the biggest questions that you're getting all the time is like, how do I spend my Bitcoin? Where is this going to be used? Is it on the ground? If so, where? Like, tell us a little bit more about that experience, on what it was like for you in the beginning, and how, like, after you became a content creator, you started getting all these questions, how that maybe has evolved.
Well, first, actually, doing content, I have really seen what people want. Like, sometimes, like, you first start reading about Bitcoin, you first start learning, and you're very passionate. Well, I was, at least in my journey, I was very passionate. At first, I wanted for everybody to use Bitcoin as money, leave fiat, like throw their bank cards to the trash, you know. But people, of course, a lot of people like using Bitcoin in their day to day. I use it in my day to day, and definitely. For example, I actually joined Blink, which is Blink is basically a medium of exchange app. Like, it lets you spend and receive Bitcoin the easiest way possible. It's custodial, of course, but it is basically for beginners. Like, it is not a replacement for self-custody. But basically the idea is to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. But I realized, of course, people like spending their Bitcoin, but that is mainly for hardcore Bitcoiners. Um, a lot of people, for example, what I noticed here in Monterrey, different to a lot of other, for example, when I visited El Salvador or Mexico City, Monterrey is very entrepreneurial, very, how is it called? Like, it's a very industrial city, and some people are like very financially informed. So in Monterrey, the culture is more like keep your Bitcoin, spend the fiat.
Okay, okay, but like,
The medium.
how does that work? So you think people in Monterey are always like holding, and in other places they're trying to spend?
Yeah, yeah, more like the medium of exchange adoption in Monterrey is almost zero. Like almost nobody spends Bitcoin. Sadly, like I would love to spend more Bitcoin in like I need, for example, I get paid in Bitcoin. I would love to just spend the Bitcoin and forget about my bank, um, and forget about cash and all that sort of stuff. Well, you need some fiat, of course. You need some fiat for the daily expenses. It's kind of hard to be all in on Bitcoin, but yeah, I would love to get more medium of exchange adoption here in Monterrey. But sadly, like since it is very volatile. Um, all only the hardcore Bitcoiners are willing to use it every day, you know, and mainly here in Monterrey, a lot of people just see it as an investment. Like the very beginners just see it as an investment, somewhere to park my money. Maybe if it goes up, I sell a little bit. That is the mentality. Of course, the idea in Bitcoin Network Monterrey is this is the asset to be in. Like it is basically the apex predator, you know, and yeah, it's better. Yeah, some, for example, Arcadia offers credit-backed loans, Bitcoin-backed loans, and sometimes that is a better solution to sell, of course. But yeah, like here in Monterrey, people are more focused on the store value aspect than in the medium of exchange.
So, since people are seeing it as a store of value, that probably means that many businesses are not using it as like a point of payment for sale, just because people don't want to spend it. And if they are storing it as a value, that means that they want to save. And the question is, where are they getting that information from? Do you think you've been the one kind of almost a little bit, I'm not going to say like you are a very big influence, so I'm asking, do you think that maybe voices like yourself and others that I've noticed that in Monterey are very much like hardcore Bitcoiners have pushed for the idea that you should be saving in Bitcoin, and maybe like you mentioned, we could use the Arcadia B loan and then get fiat in that way? Or do you think that it's almost like when people are learning on the internet by themselves, that's like the conclusion that they get? It's like, no, a lot of people actually who come to Bitcoin already had some kind of background in finance. And so do you think that because they already had that background in finance, or they did their own research, they're coming to the logical conclusion, no, probably the best thing I could do is like just skip adoption and just go straight to holding this forever, almost a little bit Michael Saylor type?
Well, I think it is, for example, I think it is a very logical conclusion people come to. For example, if you're just starting and you buy some Bitcoin and you have a lot of fiat because like the world runs on fiat right now, you know. So if you imagine if you buy 5% of Bitcoin of your overall portfolio and the rest is in whatever, if you have a lot more cash than you have Bitcoin, or if you have credit cards, if you're not all in on Bitcoin, the first rational thing to do is, well, this is gonna go up in value, this is gonna go down in value, so I'm gonna spend the Bitcoin. I'm sorry, the fiat. And also, right now in the current economy, it is 100 times easier to spend fiat than it is to spend Bitcoin. So I think it's a natural incentive, you know. Because of the volatility, because of the low medium of exchange adoption, it is a natural incentive to just use fiat, you know, for the medium of exchange part. However, that doesn't have to be like that forever. Like, the my thesis is the adoption curve. First comes store value, then comes medium of exchange, and maybe in the long-term future, Bitcoin is a unit of account. So basically, what we need to get medium of exchange adoption, is to get a lot of people holding Bitcoin. Basically, that's the idea. Like people getting very comfortable holding Bitcoin, and then when you have a lot of people with Bitcoin, then you can transact a lot easier. Because you need other people to hold Bitcoin and use Bitcoin and feel comfortable using and holding Bitcoin for it to basically expand as a medium of exchange, And so, for example, I use it a lot as a medium of exchange. For example, I use a lot, for example, Bitrefill, to buy, for example, an Amazon gift card, a Uber Eats gift card, a gift card for the supermarket. But that is because I have, for example, my income is measured in Bitcoin. Well, not measured in Bitcoin, but I basically get paid in Bitcoin, so it is a lot easier for me. But for example, if you get paid in fiat, sometimes like if you're a hardcore Bitcoiner, you're gonna be willing to do it, to go all in on Bitcoin and then spend Bitcoin. But a lot of people are not willing to do that, and because of the short-term volatility risk, it is real. So yeah, basically the hardcore Bitcoiners like me are willing to spend it all, but I think it's gonna be a while until like everybody is just naturally using it as a medium of exchange, And that's not necessarily bad. I think it's just in the stage of adoption we're at.
And so, if we're looking at it that way, you're like on one stage, which is accepting payments in Bitcoin, like a salary, for example, which is something I think most people aren't doing, or maybe it would even just be difficult to ask your company, unless it's a Bitcoin company, of course, that they pay you in Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And so, what about something like remittances? There's a lot of remittances that might come from the US to Mexico, even for El Salvador. I think it was like, I can't remember the exact number. You'll correct me afterwards if I'm wrong, but I think it's like 10% of the national GDP. Like it was some crazy, like very large number. And so technically, in a certain way, you could say you can almost jump, whether it be MoneyGram, Western Union, just any company that does remittances using Bitcoin. Do you think that these people, like average person, which is what I'm talking about, do you think the average person is going to notice this and eventually jump to Bitcoin and say, oh no, actually, I can use this new app, let's call it, where you can just send the money and it's basically free after you bought it? Or you think that we're still very far away, we need to do a lot more publicizing in order for people to know that Bitcoin exists, and then they would come to the logical conclusion, yes, we can use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to send remittances?
Well, yeah, I actually, for example, the main reason I get paid in Bitcoin is because it comes from other countries. Blink is from El Salvador. Some sponsors, my sponsors are not from Mexico. So Bitcoin is just the easiest way because we're like the Bitcoin companies hold Bitcoin. It's very easy for them to use Bitcoin. And yeah, it's awesome for remittances. It's awesome. I also pay, for example, my editor. I pay him in Bitcoin as well. But yeah, the thing is, for remittances, of course, Bitcoin is 1,000 times better than MoneyGram, Western Union, all those things. However, it is great. However, the volatility in the short term, being realistic, the reason we have not seen a huge rise in using Bitcoin for remittances is the short term volatility. For example, sometimes people don't, they just want what's easiest for them, they don't want to get educated about Bitcoin. Of course, that's going to change in the future. I'm very optimistic about Bitcoin in the future. But right now, for example, if you ask somebody in the street, if in El Salvador, for example, one of the reasons people use Blink Wallet in El Salvador is because of the stable sats feature. a lot of businesses accept Bitcoin in El Salvador. However, not all of them keep the Bitcoin. They, for example, use stable sats in the Blink wallet. The stable sats is basically a dollar balance in Bitcoin, like a Bitcoinized dollar that you can use in Lightning, and that is incredibly necessary for businesses because they cannot risk the short-term volatility. They have to pay bills. They have costs for their businesses, so it is risky for the short-term volatility. However, for example, Arcadia has a feature where you can accept Bitcoin, and a fraction you can keep it in Bitcoin, and another fraction you can keep it take it to fiat, and you can choose whatever fraction you want. And for example, in the remittances case, I think it's the same. Like if people need stability, if people need short-term stability, like the next week, if you don't want your money to fluctuate in the next week, you need some dollars or fiat. You need it. But if you, for example, if you're a Bitcoiner, of course you want to receive it in Bitcoin. You can receive it in Bitcoin, and just if you have costs, you can immediately sell some. Or if you have a big expense, you can do a Bitcoin-backed loan, something like that. But yeah, the remittances are definitely going to go up in the future in Bitcoin. I think so. But for a while, since people need fiat, like the volatility is kind of an obstacle, and that is something I learned a lot in the past years. Like I'm willing to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange because I'm educated, because I know what Bitcoin is. But if people put their needs first before educating themselves about Bitcoin, they're gonna use the easiest thing possible, and that is, well, their fiat, But in the future, I definitely see more Bitcoin remittances.
Jumping on to like a slightly parallel topic, what do you think about other Bitcoin communities in Mexico? Because we spoke a little bit about Bitcoin Monterrey, but I know there's communities in Mexico City, Guadalajara, Yucatan, Veracruz, and like several others. So tell me a little bit of like, give me a small tour. Like, let's go on a little plane from Monterrey all the way south of Mexico, and tell me a little bit about what you've thought, what you've seen. Are they any different? Are they all the same? They just like live in different places in Mexico. Just tell us more about the Bitcoin community around here.
Yeah, I actually haven't gotten to know like the Bitcoin communities. That is gonna change definitely. For example, before La Casa de Satoshi, there was Bitcoin Embassy Bar. I went there a lot.
I remember, yeah.
I
Amazing.
went. I think I went 2 or 3 times. I don't remember.
I know
I also I also got along a lot with Lorena. She was the owner. And yeah, the community was. I haven't been to La Casa de Satoshi yet. That needs to change. I think there's gonna be a conference in Mérida in December. I think Arcadia is a sponsor.
Yeah, from the 4th to
Yeah,
the 7th, you should go.
yeah. I'm gonna be there. And the audience, of course. You should be there as
And of
well.
course, the audience. Everyone should
Yeah,
go. So if you haven't
everybody.
signed up, please sign up.
Yeah. You should go. It's gonna be great. Yeah. So basically, the communities. The main one is right now in Mexico City, centered around La Casa de Satoshi. Basically, La Casa de Satoshi took the torch when the Bitcoin Embassy Bar gave the torch to La Casa de Satoshi. That there was a very cool transition. It's like a new generation now. Also in Monterrey, there was a community called Bitcoin Monterrey. I know the founder is called Manuel. He actually went to our first meetup. He started Bitcoin Monterrey like in 2013, 2014. Like he was very early. So yeah, there's kind of a new generation of a lot of cities have like 2 generations of communities. That is very interesting. And yeah, for example, we have Monterrey, we have Mexico City, we have Guadalajara. I think it's called Bitcoin and Lightning Guadalajara. I think they have a lot of foreigners as well. as well as La Casa de Satoshi. I think there are like two known developers in the Guadalajara community. There's also community in Mérida. The community in Mérida is organizing the Mayan Bitcoin conference. I don't know them personally, but that's gonna change. I wanna get to know the Mérida community. I also want to go soon to Casa Satoshi. I wanna go soon. Like I know them. I know Santiago and Gustavo. I met them actually when in adopting Bitcoin. We met for the first time there in real person, in real life. Um, and yeah, basically what the pattern I see actually in the communities is that, for example, people like communities more south tend to use Bitcoin more as a medium of exchange, and communities more to the north tend to use it more for store of value. For example, Monterrey, the medium of exchange is null, like basically zero. There is very low medium of exchange adoption here in Monterrey. But for example, you go to Ciudad de Mexico and you see more adoption. And for example, you go to, for example, República Dominicana. República Dominicana is incredible how much merchants have started accepting Bitcoin. If I'm not wrong, for example, Isla Mujeres. Isla Mujeres is another addition to the map. It's a project that Isabela Garcia. I don't know if Isabela Santos. Isabela Santos started a while ago, and it's very interesting. They're doing a lot of interesting things in Isla Mujeres, and for example, they have a lot of merchant adoption. But the more you go to the north, the less you tend to see medium of exchange adoption. For example, I think in New York, you see something similar. Like in New York, for example, where senators go, and for example, there's a bar called Popkey in New York, and I have seen clips, for example, of people just paying, for example, a senator paying in fiat there in Popkey, and it was kind of strange. But yeah, I think it's kind of similar. Like the more northern communities tend to save the Bitcoin, and the southern communities tend to circulate it more. It's kind of
I'll
interesting.
have to check, what's in the water, and each one will do a data analysis. We'll send it to the lab and see why these tendencies are happening. But something else I wanted to ask you, because again, you're a content creator and you've seen kind of what works, what doesn't work across time. What do you think is the difference of content of someone who has never heard of Bitcoin before and you're trying to speak to them? What do you think they want to see? And many of these communities could learn it like, hey, Adrian Treviño has been a content creator for many years. You're someone who's in a Bitcoin community. We want to expand. We want to make sure everyone in, let's say, Merida or Isla Mujeres, whatever, starts to adopt Bitcoin. And we're talking to someone who has never heard of Bitcoin before. What would you say versus someone who maybe isn't necessarily like in or out of Bitcoin, but they have some kind of background in finance, and maybe they had some conversations and they saw it in the TV, like they know of it and they might have, whether it be a good or bad impression, they've had some information about it. How would you change like the conversation from A to B?
Okay, for example, to get somebody onboarded, I think it depends a lot on their context. For example, yeah, it depends a lot on your country, on your socioeconomic status, and the problems in your country, basically. For example, yeah, a lot of people just want, like, you need to see, like, you need to see Bitcoin as the means, not the end. As the means and not the end. You need to see Bitcoin as a way to solve people's problems, basically. And for example, if people, for example, it's interesting to see, like, Blink Wallet, for example, the places where people use it the most is not in developed countries, but in places like South Africa, Kenya, in Nigeria, and in South Africa, I think in Bolivia, basically places where the financial system is not the best. Bitcoin works a lot for medium of exchange. For example, in South Africa, they use it a lot because, for example, with the stable set feature, they can transact within within their community extremely easy. Like they can use Bitcoin extremely easy. Also, if you have a lot of inflation, your pain point is, okay, I need to store my value, you know, like I need to put it somewhere. Like I need a unit of account that is not gonna go down in value like with inflation, you know. And that's why Argentinians and Venezuelans are like a lot of them started getting into Bitcoin very early. And a lot of Argentinians, a lot of Venezuelans, because they lived the problem, like a very big problem firsthand, and a very big solution was Bitcoin. And for example, also, like I know a guy called Mauricio, like he started Leden. He's the CEO of Leden and I think co-founder. He has a very interesting story. Like Bitcoin was the easiest way to get all of your money out of Venezuela, basically. And for example, in Argentina, a lot of people started using Bitcoin to escape the capital controls, to transact with people from other countries like Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil. There is a lot of exchange between those countries, and the financial system had a lot of problems, and a lot of people started using Bitcoin naturally because it solved their biggest problem, that it was, oh, we need to do international transactions, and Bitcoin is a lot easier than their bank alternatives. And for example, in Africa, another big pain point is they want to work for companies in developed countries, but or they want to export to developed countries. It can be digital products, digital services, or physical products and services. And a big pain point they had was we cannot get paid from other countries. Like, how do you pay? Like, for example, Tanya, do you know how to do a bank transfer to Kenya?
I don't. I'd have to check
And
my app or
yeah,
something on the phone.
yeah, like it is very difficult. For example, if you wanted to get some money, for example, last time I remember I did I sent like $10 to Palestine. I sent $10 to Palestine through Lightning. Like I used a self-custodial Lightning wallet to send them money, and they received it in a non-custodial manner. And it was instant. Like it was like in a second, I got $10 with almost no fees to Palestine. So that solved their biggest pain point. Like, for example, if you wanted to do that with a bank here in Mexico or in the US, like, how are you gonna do that? How much is it gonna cost? How much is it gonna take? It's gonna take like business days. It's gonna cost a lot in fees. It's gonna be a very big problem. So yeah, you have to think in terms of the context of the people and what problem are they trying to solve.
You know,
So
something that I
basically,
just wanted to add, sorry, and so sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
like
don't
one
worry, don't worry.
aspect that I wanted to add to like what you were saying is maybe a lot of the times people don't think about how much money in NGOs is lost with like you have to give the money to the NGO and then from the NGO to the person. How many steps or like how many bank accounts or transactions, whatever, how much is actually lost until it finally reaches the person or the cause that you're actually trying to support. So I think that what you just mentioned before for Palestine is a really big deal, just because if you look at it from like a macro scale, and we have a system that would essentially enable us to send money to exactly the person, like, hey, you want to help Fred? Here's literally Fred's bank account or the equivalent of Fred's bank account, and you can directly send him money. That is definitely
Yeah,
like a very, very big thing that would change society as a whole if it gets
yeah,
to like be mass produced.
yeah. Basically, the fact that it's borderless, it's amazing. Like it doesn't matter if we are here in Mexico or if you're in Africa or Asia. It doesn't matter. The transactions are the same. So and you can do it without intermediary, like without middlemen. Um, yeah, that's incredible. That's gonna change the world, of course. And so, yeah, for example, back to the case of people in finance, for example, a lot of people in finance are well off. Some maybe they don't have problems transacting in their everyday lives. Probably they use credit cards, they use their banks, So, but a pain point they have is they don't know where to park their money because the stock market is in a bubble. Bonds, they're not gonna do well in the in the following years. Like the currency is gonna like the US is in an enormous amount of debt. Like they have more debt than GDP.
I think it was like
So
35 trillion. Like the
yeah,
numbers are crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. So bonds are not safe. They were safe for a while until probably like 2020, where interest rates just hit zero, and that was like, okay, this is a turning point. Like they cannot go lower, and basically bonds are not safe. The stock market is in a bubble. Well, for example, I think that is why gold has been doing incredibly well, silver, and right now I think it's like how is it called? Like bearer asset season, Uh, Bitcoin is a very basically the main selling point for the developed world is basically digital gold, like uh, an asset which you can hold as a bearer asset nobody can freeze it. They're not gonna print more than 21 million. Like nobody's gonna inflate your Bitcoin away, and yeah, it's basically an incredibly like an incredible way, like a very good way, a technology that is basically savings technology. Like it serves a purpose of storing your value, like your hard work and your time and energy, to store it for the future. And that is a big problem. A lot of people have it, for example, in developed countries. Like, yeah, it's a very it's a better problem to have than not being able to exchange. But yeah, for the people that do have a lot of savings, that do have a lot of investments, basically Bitcoin is yeah, basically savings technology, like a very good store of value.
I
Yeah.
wanted to, just because we're talking so much about countries, the essential thing about a country is a government because you need it to operate. And so
Yeah.
what kind of a role do you think governments are playing worldwide in different countries regarding Bitcoin adoption? And I also want you to specifically dive into Mexico. Do you think it would be positive for Mexico to try to have something like what Bukele did, which was a top to bottom initiative where it was like, okay, we're going to try to, make this legal tender and get people onboarded. Like, what do you think is the global panorama of what you think is best? And then specifically on Mexico, what would you share as your top three priorities? It's like, okay, you and Claudia Sheinbaum get to sit for like 1 hour. Like, you have
Yeah.
this magical opportunity, and you're like three key points that you would give her. What would be like your top three recommendations?
Well, for example, I think a top-down approach like Bukele did wasn't the best approach. For example, their wallet wasn't the best. A lot of infrastructure with their wallet was not ready. Um, a lot of people were scared because, for example, if the wallet is not ready and in paper, it was mandatory to accept Bitcoin. Like in paper, it was mandatory. Of course, nobody went to jail in El Salvador because, like they're like in paper, it was mandatory, but in practice, of course, nobody is going to jail because they don't know how to accept Bitcoin. But a lot of people got scared. I actually got a comment. Somebody sent me a message like, no, it's terrible what they're doing. Like, everybody's scared. For example, the main businesses started using Bitcoin not more because of fear than to actually embrace the technology. So it wasn't organic. Then we got organic growth more from the private sector, for example, in El Sonte. But yeah, basically the idea, I think the lesson learned from El Salvador is basically like top down approach. Um, basically doesn't work that much. For example, my recommendation in Mexico, like like the government in Mexico is right now, would be to do not get in the way. Like, don't get in the way. Don't get a CBD, don't start a CBDC. Like, don't start a Bienestar coin or something like that. Don't start a Morena coin. Uh, don't start a CBDC basically, and do not get in the way of the private sector that is gonna do the actual organic growth. You know, make it easy for for the taxes side. Of course, I would love to not have capital gains taxes in Bitcoin. That will be incredible, of course. But that is my interest. That is my interest, of course. Um, but yeah, I don't think that's plausible right now because of a lot of people use it as an investment, you know. So people are gonna get into that loophole. Oh, you if you do not have to pay taxes in Bitcoin, oh, it's gonna go up a lot in Mexican pesos. Well, yeah, that's another topic. But yeah, basically the main like they don't need to start a Bitcoin treasury. They don't need to start, for example, Secretaría of Crypto or Bitcoin. How is it called? Like they don't need to start an institution dedicated to that. Just sets clear rules for the private sector, like, and let it, like, don't get in the way of the private sector. Just set clear rules, maybe clear tax rules as well, and don't get in the way. Basically, that would be my approach.
Very interesting. And as our final question, if you could give just one sentence to someone who's new to Bitcoin, what would you tell them?
Mm, maybe. Okay, let me think for a second. Okay, I think you can ignore Bitcoin, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is like the Bitcoin train is living with or without you, basically.
Very profound message. Thank you so much, Adrian. I really appreciate it. And if you didn't get it, go study Bitcoin and then it will start
Yeah,
making sense.
yeah,
This was
that's the thing.
yeah, this was Arcadia B Signal. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Tanya. See you next time.